Did break it.
Try that again? Okay, here we go. Second attempt. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council for Monday, October 25th, 2021. I now call the meeting to order at 6:31. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Clark.
I'm here.
Councilmember Infante.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem
Try that
Morona.
again? Okay.
Here. Councilmember Thomas.
Here. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council for Monday, October 25th, 2021.
Must be the rain.
Sorry.
It's a deja vu. Wow. Where were we?
Mayor Urick.
Mayor Urick is here with no lip syncing involved.
Okay, Brittany.
No even knowing.
Yeah.
Councilmember Clark, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand, place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Manager, would you do the honors of the commendation?
Yes, first item we have is the ceremonial items and commendations. We have the City of Solvang Employee of the Quarter Award, and I would like to invite Nathan, our wastewater treatment, or our wastewater division supervisor, to come up. He's been elected to be the next employee of the quarter.
Yay.
Thanks, Nathan. Congratulations. Here's your monetary award, and we also have this awesome photograph of Nathan.
Need to show that out there.
Let's see. There you go. Report, and if we can take a photo first.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3.
Were you smiling? Great job, Nathan. Thank you.
So Nathan, I just want to say a few words as to why you were nominated. This is the third quarter that we have nominations for employees for performance, and we have certain criteria that we go by in order to recognize their exceptional performance. Anybody can nominate an employee, including members of the public, so keep that in mind for the future. We have nomination forms on our website. But Nathan, you have been nominated for your overall work performance. Some of the comments were that you have an attitude and expectations for people to do their job, and you do your own as well. For leadership and interpersonal skills, you are viewed as the go-to source for help. You are a teacher and a trainer. For public relations, Nathan has recently been awarded by the Santa Ynez Valley Foundation as the Youth Leader of the Year. Nathan cares about the community and also wants to give back. Cost savings and safety suggestions. Nathan actively seeks projects that can be done by staff to save money rather than costing more money being performed by a consultant. And finally, for teamwork, you frequently give help to all other departments of the city, and you're a team player. So congratulations, nominated and appointed as the next.
Thank you for keeping it flowing, Nathan.
Thanks, Nate.
Great job. And now I'll do the presentation. There's one proclamation for Family Court Awareness. November 2021 is being recognized as Family Court Awareness Month. So Solvang has put together this proclamation. Whereas the mission at One Mom's Battle OMB and the Family Court Awareness Month Committee is to increase awareness on the importance of a family court system that prioritizes child safety and acts in the best interest of children. And whereas the mission at the FCAMC is to increase awareness on the importance of education and training on domestic violence, childhood trauma, and post-separation abuse for all professionals working within the family court system. And whereas the mission at the FCAMC is to educate judges and other family court professionals on the empirical data and research that is currently available. Such research is a critical component to making decisions that are truly in the best interest of children. This research includes the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, CDC from Kaiser Permanente, Saunders Study, which is put on by the U.S. Department of Justice, the Meyer Study, Child Custody Outcomes in Cases Involving Abuse Allegations, and the Santa Clara Law Study confronting the challenge of high conflict personality in family court. And whereas the mission of the FCAMC is fueled by the desire for awareness and change in the family court system while honoring the 100+ children in the United States who have been murdered by a parent after a custody court rejected the other parent's plea for protection. That source is from the Center for Judicial Excellence. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Charlie Urick, along with the City Council of the City of Solvang, California, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2021 as Family Court Awareness Month and encourage all citizens to join me in support in recognizing the importance of a family court system that prioritizes child safety and acts in the best interest of children. And I believe we have someone to accept that on Zoom. Is that
Hi,
Sandy?
Mayor. Thank you. My name is Sandy Ross, and thank you, City Council. I'm a volunteer on the Family Court Awareness Month Committee, and I'm also a child safety advocate. About 16 years ago, I ended up in the court system dealing with issues related to child safety, and I had no idea what the next decade was about to bring. And I guess I had faulty assumptions about how child safety issues would be the first priority in any cases. I think most people would be shocked to know in most states that family court judges can sit on the bench with zero training in childhood trauma or in domestic violence. Domestic violence is about power and control. So the desire to maintain power and control doesn't mysteriously vanish when the relationship ends. The family court system becomes a new platform for abuse. So our goal is just to shine a spotlight on the empirical research that's available and not being utilized. Our children's lives are literally dependent upon this. So I'm very grateful to the City of Solvang for joining the list. We have over 160 cities, counties, and states that have made the same proclamation that November is Family Court Awareness Month. So thank you so much for standing with us to recognize the importance of a system, a court system that prioritizes child safety. Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you do. We'll get this mailed out to you.
Thanks so much.
And I know on the agenda they were also had the Tournament of Roses Royal Court presentation, but I understand that will not be happening this evening. So, we'll move on to item number 1. Madam Clerk, would you please read that for public communication?
Public communications, non-agenda and consent agenda items, written or verbal. The council welcomes your input. At this time, you may address the council on items not on the agenda and consent agenda. Time limit is 3 minutes. We will start with the first public comment first. We will start with the in-person public comment first.
Foggy glasses. All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on any item that is not on the agenda this evening? First hand up I saw was Mr. Jackson. CJ?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Councilman. A protocol issue here. May I speak without the mask? Just
Not normally.
Okay, all right, then I'm gonna pull it up so that I can make it effective. Nope, I want to follow protocol. Very simply, I'm not here at all of your meetings, but a subject that I wish to address and I hope we'll have a future resolution, quite simply, is recognition of your Public Works Director. As one who has interfaced not only with your current Public Works Director for the last 11 years, I interfaced also with all of his predecessors dating back 26 years. I hope that in your search for a replacement, you will find someone with the same ethical code and the axiom of public service that was demonstrated in Mr. Van der Linden. I will miss him. Fortunately, his commitment to his community doesn't end at his locker here at the city, and I know that I'll be seeing him in the community, as I have in many capacities, for an array of issues and involvement in volunteerism. But I do hope that your search will yield someone with not only the capability, but the ethical compass that he demonstrated, and, as I said, the customer service ethic. So I thank you, and I pass that on. I hope if there is an event in the future to recognize him, I'll be looking to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Next up, I think was Ed St. George, or someone over there.
Hi, greeting council people. Cindy, do you have the image by any chance?
If you could just pull up my screen.
Yeah, basically I'm just here today. I wanted to invite the council and the community here to a project that we're doing. It's called a micro unit. We're having an open house this Saturday from 10 to 2 p.m. We definitely urge and would love for all of you to come and stop by. Really the purpose of this micro unit is to address the needs of being able to provide affordable housing within the Solvang community, where we can retain the local work and talent of the workforce here, rather than having to solicit it from Lompoc and the Santa Maria areas. We've actually kind of did a beta test with advertising this out, along the Santa Ynez publications as well as Santa Maria news, and we found, as well as on Craigslist, and we found a tremendous amount of interest by local individuals here that are single in the city of Solvang, that are saying like, hey, this is something I'd really be interested in. As you know, one of the projects proposed is having the hotel here to be constructed by Ed St. George. And one of the key primary things to first look at is for the staff of that hotel, or for even in the local business areas, to really be able to provide that kind of staffing accommodations. And one of the solutions we're looking to explore is one of these micro units, and we have the model available on Saturday to come tour it. We also are hoping not only to impact this in other positive streams as well as carbon footprint. These units are going to come completely furnished. We notice that people tend, at the end of their year-end lease or term, they tend to throw out their furniture at quite a high rate, and as well as also have a reduction in traffic by providing e-bikes. I spoke to Jack. I don't know if he's here today. I haven't been able to put a name with a face yet. But Jack did tell me that was something of interest, to have e-bikes in order to lessen the incoming traffic and as well as free up parking, because we do know that parking can be a bit of a problem here in the city of Solvang. So yeah, would love for all of you to attend.
Thank you. Would you please state your name?
Yes, sorry, my name is Mikhail and my last name is Pulley.
Thank you, for the record.
Thank you.
Ed?
Mayor Yuri, council members, I just want to kind of reiterate what Mikhail was just saying. There was a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of curiosity about what a micro studio is or a micro unit. Anything with a micro in front of it, it needs to be under 400 square feet, according to federal, I don't know if it's guidelines or something, but that's everything that I've read. And this particular unit, I'm calling it a micro studio, falls at about 365 square feet as built currently. It's over in the lumber yard. It's in the old lumber shed, the kiln dried shed, and it will be open house today, as Mikhail said, from 10 to 2. It's difficult to tell from a drawing when you explain to somebody that I'm gonna give you a place to live that's smaller than your 2-car garage. It seems really small and not very inviting, but actually when you come over and visit it, I think you'll have a much different idea of how it feels. A lot of times what's happening is people that are single that really can't afford a typical apartment. What they're doing is they're grouping up in housings, like 3 or 4 bedroom homes, and they're sharing what I call intimate spaces. Those intimate spaces are kitchens, bathrooms, living rooms, and they tend to hold up into their bedroom. This gives people their own individual space, their own privacy. It's not big, it's got a fold-down bed. Unfortunately, we don't get a fold-down bed in the model, just because of the supply chain issues we have right now. But it's not functioning, but there are all the amenities. You'll see the refrigerator, the toilet, the sink, everything will be there. And you'll get a really good idea. One of the reasons I'm really, it's kind of funny, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, is if we're really going to do a true 4-star hotel in Solvang, we really need to have people from the valley working there. There is a completely different mindset, it seems, just 20, 25 miles away. They don't really understand the community, somewhat like Santa Barbara versus Ventura. You know, it's hard to understand how we grew up in Santa Barbara and to really emulate what Santa Barbans really think if you're living in Ventura. And that's really picked up in a community, and especially like if you're working in a hotel or in a restaurant. My son just got a job over at the Coast Range. Loves his job, by the way. Those guys are doing a great job. But apparently there's only like 2 people that live in the valley that work there, him and the dishwasher. That's what he's telling me. And that's got to be real difficult on the restaurant owners themselves. When you think about that, it's like, how are you supposed to convey your community to these people, these visitors coming in, especially.
We'll see you on Saturday.
Please come.
We'll be there. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on any item again that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, do we have any in Zoom?
I think Mr. St. George is the first person that actually stopped talking when that mic went off.
We appreciate that.
I'm married.
We have one speaker on Zoom.
Looks like Jamie Baker.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, this is Jamie Baker at Space VR. And I wanted to take the time to let everyone know that this Saturday, between 11:30 and 12:30, the eighth wonder of the world will be parked outside Space VR. The Oscar Mayer Wienermobile is coming for a visit. And I want to really say thank you to Valley Fresh, because the guys over there are going to provide sort of some hot dogs and everything for the visit when the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile comes into town. So if I know that we have the haunted house starting later that day, and if kids are coming around for Saturday and around town, just to let them know that amazing automobile will be parked down here on Alisal.
What was the time frame again? 11:30 to 12:30?
Yes,
This Saturday, okay.
yes.
I don't know how I'm supposed to compete with the Oscar Mayer mobile. Housing, hot dogs.
Ed, it's not a living opportunity, though. It's just gonna be here for now. So.
All right, thank you, Jamie, appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Is there anyone else out there in Zoom that would like to speak on any item? Again, not on the agenda for tonight. Seeing none, we'll move on to the city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would like to start by reminding everybody about more events coming up. So yes, the first one would be Haunted House is back this year. We'll have that starting on the 29th, Friday, and it will continue through the Saturday. It is across from the Theater Fest now. Usually it's located at the Theater Fest, so You would need to go behind the theater to find the location, but there will be clear markings for everyone that wants to participate to come and join. We also have the YuleFest program that is available for viewing now on solvangusa.com, and that putting together the program is fully in progress. And I know that there's been some questions from people wondering how to enter into the parade. So the parade registration is actually available on solvangusa.com. There's a way to click, if you click on the parade, you can go ahead and submit your entry. And YuleFest will be going from November 27th through January 1st. For the Solvang General Plan update, we have a little bit of a change in schedule because we want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunity for public input. So we have moved the workshop to January 13th, and it will take place at the Veterans Hall, but all of the details will be upcoming. We will be sending out multiple notifications to the public, alerting them of this opportunity. This would be a workshop to talk about the alternative choices, so there will be discussion about land use and circulation for the public to comment on. The alternative choices report will be posted on plansolvang.com in mid-December, so about December 15th, and that will allow about a month for review for the public. The upcoming committees are on Monday, November 1st, there will be a planning commission. Tourism Advisory Committee will be holding its first regular meeting on November 4th at 5 p.m. They will be once again continue to discuss the marketing contract scope recommendations, which will then be turned around and brought to the City Council. So this is an opportunity for public to participate and provide their feedback. And then the Design Review Committee will be meeting on November 18th at 5 p.m. as well. Reminding everybody about the drought stage 2 and the mandatory reduction by 20%. This map here shows you the drought map for the United States. You can see how severe the conditions are in California. So the drought charges and penalties will apply beginning with the current billing cycle. So the bills that will be going out here at the end of the week will include the new drought regulations. And we are also including an informational flyer that describes in detail all of the details of the resolution and the drought stage 2 conditions for those who would like to better understand their bill and how the charges will be applied to them. For advanced calendar, we have a busy agenda coming up in November. We have the bike ride share program that Councilmember Infante requested to be included at the last meeting. We also have a request from Broadband Countywide Program for Solvang participation. This is something that's coming through SBCAG, and they will be making presentations to all of the jurisdictions in Santa Barbara County to be part of the broadband efforts, which is basically your cable for the internet. Fiscal year 2021-22 quarter 1 financial report will be presented to you, which will include the details and analysis on our revenue up to date as well as expenditures. We'll be talking about the fiscal year 2022-24, the next 2-year financial plan, and the schedule for that plan development. I also anticipate to be able to bring for your review and approval an employee handbook update at that point, which will be rolled out to employees. We'll have the groundwater sustainability plan. We'll have Bill Bulow present here making a presentation, who is the main staff for the GSA that we are part of. We also have a notice of completion for South Also pavement project, which is substantially complete. The Cal Recycle SB 1383 regulations resolution will be coming forward, and that is new regulations that are mandated by the state for the organic waste. And we also have some city code ordinance amendments for Title 11, which will be presented first to the Planning Commission and then to City Council. And then on November 22nd, we'll do a kind of midterm contract marketing update for the City Council, in addition to the TAC that's been working with the marketing consultant IDK. We'll have the first meeting discussing the process for the utility rate study, which is currently underway. That is your water and wastewater rates, which are two distinct operations for the city. We'll talk about some parking improvements and sign management in the TRC area. Present to you the sewer master plan update, which is in the final stages of completion, and then also construction contract for the 2nd Street drainage improvements. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions of this city manager's report? Seeing none. Moving on to item number 3, council comments. Request. Councilmember Infante.
Thank you. I don't see Lieutenant Green here, but I just wanted to give kudos to the Sheriff's Department last night on an arrest they made of somebody who was stealing catalytic converters. And that happens in the city. But more than that, they were heavily armed and taken into custody without any problems. I just want to say thanks to the men and women that go out and do this for us. Also, I would hope to see some of you at the haunted house Friday and Saturday. One of us at least will be one of the monsters, so hopefully we'll see you there. That's it.
No makeup needed.
None needed.
Councilmember Infante.
Thank you. 2 comments. One is I had hoped that the CEO of the Tournament of Roses Royal Court would have been here to make the presentation. We had that whole group of about 30 people, which started with the 6 young ladies, and Mayor Pro Tem Morona and I were at the breakfast where they attended, and they were wonderful. Very, very thankful. The CEO had asked me if he could address us, and unfortunately, I was hoping it would happen this evening, but it didn't happen. But they presented both of us with signed posters with all of the young ladies' signatures on it. They were walked away by Alex Grunier, the young man on the Church Advisory Committee and Chamber of Commerce, who is the same age as all of these young ladies, so it was a perfect match. He's a perfect gentleman. It worked out really, really well. I was quite pleased to see that. And then I believe they all got on the Honan and were given a ride around town to see the city and everything else.
Yes.
But it was a really nice event. Aaron Peterson, I have to thank him. He had Mortenson's. We had Danish and coffee out there because it was early in the morning. It's cold. I don't get up that early. I'm old. Anyway, worked out really, really, really well. I can't remember what the other thing I was going to say. Thank you.
Did you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Pro Tem Morona?
Yes, so this weekend we had the half marathon wine walk, and I was there downtown checking it out. They had a fantastic MC. It looked like all of the participants had a lot of fun, and I have to say the crew did a very good job on clearing the street as soon as possible. I did get some comment from some of the vineyards. The route was a little different this year because of all the street closures and whatnot, and a lot of winemakers were trying to get their fruit quickly before the rain hit. So the street closures made things a little more challenging. I know that the producers made quite an effort to let everybody know about it. I just think that maybe when they submit the plan, and I didn't see the plan for the event, but it'd be good to see what their plan is for communication to the public in general, to make sure that everybody knows what the street closures are so that they can plan around it. I know that nobody planned for rain this weekend, but that would be my only comment. But other than that, I do know that the organizers did submit a pretty detailed plan on when everything was scheduled to be closed and reopened back again. And I did get the postcard, but I did get the comment that some people didn't get it. So it's always good to
just to evaluate how we're getting that information out. And other than that, I had a great time with those young ladies. They were very engaging, and I think Solvang is a perfect town for them to visit, because we have a lot of nonprofits and outreach organizations for such a tiny town, and they were all about building their community and learning and making a difference in the world. So I was very honored that we were part of their journey.
All right.
And if I may add to that, one more thing, sorry.
No.
They intend to do this every year. So we will be the location that they will come to every year to try and evaluate the young ladies as they meet with the public and train them on how to speak on different events and things of that nature. So we're gonna be getting to see them every year. I think it's terrific.
All right. Councilmember Clark. did you-
I was just gonna reiterate what, or say what Jim already said about Lieutenant, or Chief Green. Excellent job and kudos to them. Don't forget, folks, that November 7th, is it, Zena, that the Dinner Impossible is gonna be showcased in Solvang?
I believe.
Unless
that's
that changed
the date.
again?
No, I don't think that it's been changed.
Okay.
Second or seventh?
Honestly, it is not a date that I remember as of right
It was
now.
the 7th.
I can
We'll just
look
double
it
check
up.
it. Maybe we can put that on the website.
Sure, we can put that on the website. It's a good marketing piece once it airs.
And then the last thing was there was apparently 2 influencers, travel influencers, were in Mexico this last week and were shot. And on the national news this morning, one of the people that was a victim, her most recent post was in Solvang about how wonderful it is here. And they showed the post from Solvang on the news this morning. It was sad and interesting that some places are pretty dangerous, but my heart goes out to those people for pushing.
Thank you. Yes, and then I had just had a couple of comments. Mainly was I attended the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments meetings last week, and one of the items on there was just a little bit of a memorandum on Joe Centeno, who is a former supervisor up in the Santa Maria Valley. He also was a former city council member and mayor of Santa Maria, and he was very instrumental in bringing Measure A to our county and making improvements, utilizing those funds to finish off the Santa Maria Bridge as well as Highway 166. And he served on the SBCAG board from 2002 to 2010 and was the chairman of the SBCAG board in 2006. So he had the service this morning, and just our thoughts and prayers go out with the Centeno family. And then the one big item that we'll be hearing at our next council meeting was the item regarding the broadband. And you'll hear about it, but what they're proposing is they're going through to all the cities and trying to get some of the cities based on our population to assist with the finances for the study that's going to be done for broadband. And Solvang's, I think they're saying it's about $3,600 is what Solvang would be trying to give to that. Because the Santa Barbara County has already put in $200,000. I think it's approximately $400,000 is what the total would be. But that's going to be spread out among the county, the Shumash, as well as the 8 cities. So those are the main items on that. I know on Saturday I was fortunate I got up early so I could give a welcome to the 2,300 participants this Saturday for the Wine Country Half Marathon. So that event went off, and it was nice to see one of our local boys, Connor Reck, was one of the guys that was in the elite group as he had qualified earlier for the Olympics trials in the marathon. So that was pretty cool to see Connor Reck there and his family, Joanne and Jeff. And then lastly, the food bank, I didn't get numbers for last Tuesday, but the Tuesday of October 12th, they had their lowest number in quite some time, it said. There were 772 individuals, 198 households, and 34 were new this year, which is about half of what it's been over the course. I don't know what it was last Tuesday, but they always need help. They'll be at again tomorrow, Tuesday, out there at Bethania. So thank you again to all those volunteers that work with that. And that's my final comments on there. Any last words before we go to item number 4. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 4?
The consent agenda is designed for routine administrative city matters and is approved by roll call vote with one motion. These items are discussed only on request of council members. Members of the public were afforded an opportunity to speak on consent agenda items during the public communications portion of this agenda. Consent agenda: A, approval of agenda as presented. B, approved minutes of the regular meeting of October 11, 2021. C, received monthly Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department compliance report for the month of September 2021.
Do any council members wish to have any items pulled?
No.
No? Then we can, is there a motion to accept the council agenda as presented?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Marona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Heurig.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. Moving on to regular business items. Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 5?
Alisal Guest Ranch Conceptual Project Review, addition of outdoor luxury retreat, glamping, and annexation of approximately 10 acres. Review the conceptual proposal by Alisal Guest Ranch to annex approximately 10-acre area directly east of the existing guest ranch into the city for development of approximately 40 glamping guest units, and provide staff with policy direction.
Thank you. So I'll just kick it off with a brief introduction, and then we have the representatives of the Alisal Guest Ranch here with a presentation. So this is just a conceptual review at this point, as has been just read into the record that Alisal Guest Ranch has submitted the conceptual proposal for annexation of approximately 10 acres, which is directly adjacent to the range. Staff seeks policy direction from council, whether you would like us to continue to work with this project and with the guest range to further develop recommendations in a project. So today's is a general policy direction. Some of the benefits of the annexation would be the proposed glamping project would yield additional income in TOT, and it also provides us with local control, being able to regulate the use of that land. The challenges are impacts on the utilities, as those are proposed to be connected to the city water and wastewater, although that's not impossible, but it's something that will need to be worked out, and potentially impacts to public safety. If council directs staff to proceed working with Alisal Guest Ranch on this proposal, staff recommends negotiating a reimbursement agreement for legal, planning, and utility work on this project. And with that, I would invite representatives of the Guest Ranch to make their presentation.
Please step forward and just make sure you state your name.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Heurig. Steve Fort with Suzanne Ellis Planning and Permitting. I'm here today with Kathleen Cochran, the general manager out at the Alisal, and a representative ownership, CJ Jackson. I do have a presentation that I hope we can pull up. And when I need to switch slides, I'll just let you know. Please.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Yep. We do appreciate your time today, for sure. There we go. You want me to click, or do you?
Just make sure it works.
Okay.
I will click.
Okay. Well, I introduced the team again, Steve Ford with Suzanne Ellis Planning and Permitting, Kathleen Cochran, and CJ Jackson here with me today. You can click to the next slide. I think I'm good with the microphone. Why don't we go back one, please? Well, no, sorry, you had it. Right there is a good place to start. The core of the guest ranch is currently on what is labeled by APN, the 10 on the APN map that's sitting there. That's where the core of the ranch is today, the rooms, back of house, the reception lobby. The two parcels that we're talking about today, I put a green dot there. One is parcel 13, I believe, it's about 300 acres, and then there's a smaller parcel that I think is 5 to 10 acres, labeled with the 11 there. The key thing here is parcel 10 is currently in the city of Solvang, and 13 and 11 are not in the city of Solvang. They're outside the boundary. They are in the county of Santa Barbara. So we'll get to a site plan in a moment here, but again, the ranch is interested in exploring expanding by about 40 rooms or so, kind of an outdoor, more of a outdoor type of setting for the rooms. I mentioned the 40 guest units. In this area, where they're discussing adding these accommodations, they'd also make provisions for a reception area, dining facility, saloon, a pool, and a spa. Again, very conceptual, as you'll see going through there. We haven't drawn up plans or a formal site plan or even formal floor plans yet. There would also be accessory structures, landscaping, associated site improvements, drainage improvements, parking, that sort of thing. I think I've mentioned the juxtaposition of the properties. And I do want to add, while we're at this slide, when we started this conversation, we were thinking in terms of requesting a potential initiation of an annexation, that it would be the entire 300 acres of parcel 13 and then the 5 or so acres of parcel 11. But we are confident that if this is to move forward, you could probably do it with a lot line adjustment. It would be one of the entitlements that would be requested, so that the annexation, if it's decided to move forward, wouldn't necessarily have to involve all 300 acres, but it could be a different configuration that could bring in the areas of the parcel that were proposed for the expansion of the guest accommodations. And you could go to the next slide, please. We're going to get into the sort of the concept of what is being considered right now. I am going to ask Kathleen Cochran, the general manager, to come up for just briefly and kind of explain the intent and the need and the desire by the LSL to conduct this project.
Hello, Mayor, Council, Kathleen Cochran, General Manager for LSL, also a Solvang resident. While I have the floor, I just want to thank you for the fantastic roadway into LSL. It's delightful. It was worth all the wait.
Now let's see if we can get the county on board to finish the rest.
So, as Steve said, I guess I'm here to really talk to you about the why. And the why are we sort of looking at this now. And for the past 5 years, we have been very focused on building back LSL's business. And we've been wildly successful. And I think a lot of that has to do with exploratory travel and experiential travel. And that's just not a trend. That's something that is here to stay and is going to continue. People want to come and have an experience. And our market segment is shifting, so we are attracting more and more millennials. So my job as the general manager is not necessarily to worry about why the toilet isn't working in room 23, but to really worry about the future and to make sure that Alisol is here for generations of Jacksons to come. And so looking at when we're going to sort of max out and reach capacity, I'm almost there. So probably in 12 to 18 months, I will reach maximum hotel occupancy. In other words, I won't be able to take any more people just with arrivals and departures. And so now what? how do we continue to grow as a company and continue to grow our business for years to come. So that's the why. Thank you.
All right, you can jump back, go ahead a slide. So again, like I explained, the concept now is more of a sort of family-friendly, outdoorsy, glamping tent-based sort of experience. Get those, the people that want to be more outside, kind of jives with what's been going on with the pandemic recently as well. You can, next slide, please. And here is the location that we're talking about, kind of shaded in yellow, a little bit crosshatched there, is that hillside just east of the existing ranch. Again, that's on that larger parcel. It's not currently within the city. That's the proposed site at this time. I would also want to point out, I mentioned the parcel to the south that also is into the city, includes some of those rodeo grounds, just kind of south of where it's green on the core of the ranch. And there's also some employee housing and some other accessory structures that would be interested in bringing into the city, just on the very south bottom side of that photo there. So that kind of gives you the idea of the proximity that we're talking about. You can go to the next slide. I believe this is a survey of that hatched shaded area that I just showed you, just for reference. It is a hillside, again, just above the existing ranch, and there is a drainage that goes through there. A general site plan layout to kind of show you how it may get laid out. There's really two options there. They aren't that different. One has a few more rooms over on the right side or the north side, parking up in the top right corner or the north side corner near where the intersection of the street is. The units would be scattered on that hillside with the sort of back of house or the services kind of centered in the center there, where you can see a small dining area, a small saloon, pool, spa. Next slide, please. Again, more sort of inspiration images of how this might take shape and kind of what the vision is. Next slide, please. Potential guest accommodation layout, pretty straightforward. Little patio, probably not an actual fire pit, not being the safest thing, but that made it onto the rendering. Next slide, please. More inspirational photos about the potential saloon. We can go to the next one, please. Just a shot of the zoning map. On the left is the finger of the city that goes southward below the core of the city. The yellowish parcel down at the bottom on the bottom left is the existing ranch, zoned agriculture, and that's we'll get into the agriculture and zoning and the general plan on the next slide here. So what we would be proposing to do is annex the property into the city with a general plan designation that matches the existing ranch, an agricultural designation with a guest ranch overlay. So it would be zoned for ag, and this is just a quote right out of the current general plan. The agricultural / guest ranch designation is intended to recognize the ranch as unique in the community. Working ranch that encompasses over 10,000 acres, with approximately 30 of it included in the city. And then it just kind of describes the ranch, the units, and the services. And it speaks to the current conditional use permit that the ranch is operating under. On the zoning side, again, we would propose to match the zoning on the core of the existing ranch, currently in ag zoning. A guest ranch is a permitted use within the ag zone, excuse me, with approval of a major conditional use permit. And what we would be doing is amending or revising that existing conditional use permit, bringing it up to date, bringing in the additional units, applying more modern conditions of approval. The current CUP is really sort of an old antiquated county CUP that doesn't have a lot of conditions tied to it. We think it's an opportunity to sort of modernize that CUP within the city's entitlement process. Next slide, please. Urban growth boundary consistency is certainly going to be a consideration. We're aware of that. We're aware that the growth boundary does allow for annexation of ag zone lands and continued ag uses. And those types of annexations aren't subject to the urban growth boundary. Only uses consistent with agricultural and the preservation of open space shall be allowed. Again, we're proposing to bring this in as an ag zone property with the guest ranch overlay, exactly like the existing ranch operates and is entitled today. And I'm sure we're going to be deliberating about this, and this is kind of the crux of why we're here, is we'd like to get some feedback on whether this is something the city would like to pursue or not. Next slide, please. What we're anticipating in terms of an entitlement process with the city, if we move forward, would be an amendment to the existing CUP, design review with the design review committee, general plan and zoning amendments to bring in that property and adopt those designations of ag guest ranch and ag zoning. And then would be a request for the initiation of the proceedings to move along to LAFCO after the city would make a positive recommendation for that annexation. And probably question is, could be a question on your mind is, if this doesn't move forward, what are the options for the ranch? And the option is to go to the county and request a CUP from them to entitle the expansion of the ranch. And so we would, presuming that we would move forward, we'd probably approach the county for a CUP and have to, and then during that process, and there would certainly be discussions and talks with the city about provision of services. But in that case, the entitlement would come from the county. Next slide, please. Kathleen, who you spoke, general manager, she did run a TOT estimate. And this is based on, after about a year of settling in and getting the rooms in place, it was estimated that just under $700,000 a year could be available for additional TOT based on the proposed expansion of about 40 units. And next slide, please. Again, the benefits that we think it offers the city, added accommodations and experiences for visitors to the city. The city would have jurisdiction over the proposed project, design review, conditions of approval, public hearings, and an amendment to the CUP allows the city to kind of update that CUP, develop and apply more modern conditions of approval. And we also, we think it's a significant benefit that we hope you'll consider is the annexation allows the ranch to expand, but in the jurisdiction of the city, kind of in partnership with the city, rather than just seeking entitlements from the county and services from the city. We think it just makes a nicer package, and we just soon and rather come in process with the city than deal with two jurisdictions. Added TOT, city water and sewer services would be provided and paid for. And it also potential future opportunities, such as perhaps the ranch wants to propose a meeting facility or something in the future. Again, it's the opportunity for the city of Solvang to process those entitlements and kind of be a partner in those. Next slide. I think that's probably it. Thank you. And we're here for questions or discussion. If you have anything, happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Appreciate that. Are there any questions of the council? Yeah. Councilmember Infante.
Well, first we have to mention for the public's sake that I and I think a few other members have met with the Alisal Ranch in advance of this meeting. So we did get an opportunity to see this information prior to tonight and think about it and ask a whole bunch of silly questions, at least in my case. I would have a couple of questions for you, Steve, if I may. It sounds like that your preference would be the full 320 acres be brought into the city, although 10 is all you need for the glamping facilities. Is that a reasonable statement?
I think it's necessarily a preference. I think
An option.
to an option, sure, yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a preference. Could listen either way.
Okay, well, it was something that's always,
Yep.
you explained this fairly well, and I appreciate it. The 4.6 acres where the rodeo grounds are down to the employee housing, and it was something that we had discussed when I was with you, with the possibility of putting in a convention meeting space, wedding space, things that you could rent out would be nice. So is the 4.6 part of your request, or are you at this point in time asking only for the 10 acres?
We would prefer to include that area to the south as well, so the additional 4.6. And then there's actually a few more acres that are part of that larger parcel where I pointed out where there's some employee housing and some accessory type equestrian and ranch facilities.
That's not in the 4.6 acres?
I believe it's just south of that.
Just south of the 4.6?
Just
Okay.
south of it, so maybe we're
Another
talking
acre.
about 20 acres or 18
Okay.
or 20 acres, something like that.
One of the things that was mentioned in the city manager's report was that there would have to be some discussions on you helping us, because if we are going to put in water and sewer systems to support this, it's gonna take a little bit of effort and a lot of cost, the important part. I did speak with the Public Utilities Director, Matt Vanderlinden, about this and whether we could support that. His comment was that we could, even though we've got this drought situation, it's a possibility, okay? There was two things that he wanted to have as part of the agreement, and I would ask staff to make note. There's a 20,000 gallon water reservoir on a hill that is the gravity feed system in case of the power is cut off. You've got water to your houses down there in that area. That's an insufficient amount, and it's an old structure that needs to be rebuilt. According to Matt, that should probably be 100,000 gallons, and we're talking about, a lot of money. About $1 million, I think, was his rough estimate off the top of his cuff of what it was gonna cost to put in that 100,000 gallon water reserve. And that is, again, to your benefit, because if the power is cut off for a fire or whatever, you'd still have water pressure to all of your rooms and tents and whatever else we've got going on if we all get all this together. I think the third thing he wanted was there is an access way of about 10 foot in width, and it's an inadequate size for the equipment that would need to go down there, so we'd like to have the city access to the reservoir and to other facilities down there be enlarged. You'll have to ask an engineer how large that needs to be, but Matt seemed to think that 10 foot was just not quite cutting it. I do know that in talking on other events that an ambulance has to have at least 12 foot width, so we need a little bit more room is what we're saying. So at this point in time, if we were to go back to, let's say, 20 acres now, you have to go to LAFCO and get them to carve out that much property and set a new boundary line. Is that correct?
My understanding of the process is that LAFCO would be requested to do that on a recommendation from you folks after.
Okay, we recommend it, they have to do that, and okay.
Yes.
I got you, thank you. I think That's all of my questions and comments for now.
All right, is there any comments at this time?
Yeah, I do have a question. Have you approached the county so far? Can I see how they feel about the project?
You know, we haven't done anything formally such as this. I have informally asked about it, and there wasn't much of a reaction one way or the other. I think they thought it made some sense for us to approach you and see if the city was interested in annexing this property in. My gut feeling is if we were, just based on my experience, if we go and submit an application to the county, I think we might get, well, did you check with Solvang? Are they interested in this or not? I mean, they process, if we submit something, they're going to process it, but I think they would want to maybe follow up a little bit, just to make sure this was something that the city was asked to weigh in on, such as we're doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Go ahead, CJ.
Mayor, council members, mostly my family's strategy is to hire the best talent and have them carry the ball forward on this. Unfortunately, I've been in this community for 26 years, so I have some institutional memory to contribute to some of the issues that have been expressed here. First and foremost, the current CUP that the LSL operates on is older than I am, and I'm 63. And so the idea of this is to take the existing operation and to expand to give us the capacity that we presently don't have because we've maximized our utilization. Another element that you probably have maybe asked or wondered is, how did Solvang develop with this long, very narrow finger down there? And that did have to do with the construction of Rancho Alisal and the embracing of the Alisal Guest Ranch into the city as part of recognition of the construction of the wastewater treatment plant, which, as you know, is constructed originally on property belonging to the Alisal, and that was cut off in 1962 to create that with the Solvang Municipal Improvement District. So there is some historical context to the fact that the property you're looking at has been maintained in its current use with poles and ties within it, but staying within those boundaries. The reason you had asked, would we want to take the entire 300-acre parcel in there? Well, quite frankly, the entire 300-acre parcel is presently in the agricultural preserve, and we think that's an attractive place for it to stay. To understand a little bit about this annexation is to recognize it is completely surrounded by the Alisal Ranch. There are no additional neighbors who are impacted by this. It is our own property. And the Rancho Alisal construction brought the sewer line practically all the way down to the Guest Ranch area, not far from that. So it's proximity. That doesn't mean it's expense. I'm not saying that. It is the same for city water. That reservoir container at the top of the hill there has been there ever since Rancho Alisal was constructed. And it assists the city both for what the Guest Ranch utilizes as well as Rancho Alisal for balancing the water pressure to reach on multiple hills, etc. And there are other component parts, other cisterns that contribute to that. So the idea here, and just to go to the far south, kind of an interesting element, the two residences we're talking at the far south of the property that we'd like to add are the residence for the employees of the Alisal Cattle Ranch. So the general manager there and the administrative executive assistant manager reside in those two houses. Interestingly enough, because they're in the county and not in the city, they had a long haul to get a mailbox associated with it because it is removed into the rural area there. So I give that historical context because essentially you are taking the parcel that you've known and come to know for the better part of, well, since 1946, when it first became a guest ranch and when my family acquired it in 1943. This is not an attempt to expand out. It is an attempt to attract a complementary market segment, not change our entire approach, but to expand to a market segment that has experiential demand. And that's why it's a little different. We're not going to change our entire proposition if we do this, but we will supplement that with a new outreach to a more current market. So that's where the attraction comes in. Therefore, the give and take with the county about moving lot line adjustments, I believe, is not uncommon, and I don't think it's particularly difficult. The fact that we could update this CUP is an attraction. So I give this as historical context as it might bear on your discussion of the urban boundary as well. So I thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I have probably one or two questions here, just related to city limit and county limit line. With what you're proposing going further south, is that going to change the limit line to south of the two residents on that dirt road? And then are you thinking the east boundary would just be Rancho Ellisal Drive, going up north to bring in Sharon and Rancho Ellisal on the north side?
Yeah, something very
Something
similar to that, yes.
Just that.
Yeah.
Is that about an eighth of a mile further south for the limit line?
Give or take, yeah.
Would we be responsible first for finishing up make it a 2.9 mile? I guess that's part of it, because we would have the paving to finish off. Should we have the counties, or should we stay where we're at essentially right now with the county trying to finish off the road? Because I really think one thing that is missing with this whole thing is you have one entrance in and out that's a nice entrance and it's coming into Solvang. But realistically, we need to finish and have the county join with us or anybody to finish off Ellisal South out to 101, so we can actually have a nicer two-lane road as a bypass coming into Solvang and to your ranch, and it would give you guys, I can just see all the people coming in, and it would be a much prettier drive coming that direction than going up to the 246, coming all the way through town to go back down 3 miles. It's just a thought.
Sure.
But it's a big thought and it's a big expense, just adding an extra little bit of roadway that the city would then be responsible for, I'm assuming, if we did change that. So that'd be one expense as well. Being that we just finished it, I don't know if nobody's even brought that part up yet, especially if you're gonna go south. But I was just kind of curious about that.
It hasn't come up, but I would presume if we move the boundary to the south, that portion of the road would fall under the jurisdiction of the city.
I'm sure the county would say, yes, it does. A little bit.
And that is something that could be discussed through the process with the LAFCO,
Yeah.
as far as that agreement.
Well, overall, thank you for presenting that. And do we want to give any direction, or do we need to go to public comment right now? Forgot about that. Is there any public comment that's in the audience that would like to make any comments on this project going forward? Seeing none, is there any out in Zoom? I see Susan. See your hand raised.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. I'm Susan Bott, Chairman of Save Our Solvang. Last year, Save Our Solvang circulated a petition sponsoring the Urban Growth Boundary Initiative, which was subsequently adopted by the Solvang City Council on June 8, 2020. The UGB stated that future projects involving annexations of land within the city of Solvang could only take place upon an affirmative vote by citizens of Solvang. Certain specific exceptions to that rule included public schools and public services and facilities. The Solvang UGB is designed to protect agricultural lands, watersheds, and open space lands surrounding the city from conversion to non-agriculture or non-open space uses without public debate and in the friendly will of the people. That was a quote, by the way. I question how glamping protects ag land exactly. Neither does a pool spa, dining facility, and saloon offer that protection. Your staff report on this proposal lists several benefits to the city as well as potential costs and other impacts. Since stating that city staff will have to evaluate these impacts, both positive and negative, it seems the evaluation process is actually a job for Solvang's voting citizens, not just for city staff. The final decision should be reported to the city council by way of the ballot outcome. It would be the job of the applicant to make a convincing argument in favor of their project, to be presented to the voting citizens of Solvang via ballot arguments and campaign literature. We hope that you will honor our urban growth boundary by giving citizens of Solvang their mandated opportunities to evaluate and vote on the Alisal Ranch project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments out in Zoom? Seeing none, bring it back to council. Are there any final comments or questions?
Yeah, so Dave, maybe you can help us out with that. So it looks to me like what would be considered as agricultural under this urban growth boundary resolution is consistent to what the county considers to be agricultural, is that right?
So I was not involved in the UGB ordinance when it was adopted, or resolution. That was with the prior city council and prior city attorney. I have read through it, and there are some provisions in there that obviously would be open to some interpretation, but it does says that only uses consistent with agriculture and the preservation of open space lands as set forth in Government Code Section 65550 will be permitted. Now, this resolution was adopted to amend the city of Solvang's land use restrictions, and so the definition and uses that are permitted for agricultural land under Solvang's municipal code would be part of the UGB as well. So I think as long as the land is being kept as agricultural zoned, and there are provisions in the code for this type of use, there's a way through the UGB. I don't think it necessarily requires a vote of the people, certainly. It is consistent with the express language. That is one of the dangers of citizen initiative sometimes, though, is that the imprecision of language or the lack of definitions, you have to interpret it according to the remainder of the code that you have. So that's something that we've looked at in preparation for this. Obviously, it's going to depend in large part on what the actual project is and whether or not the council wants to give direction to even go down this road, because I've only spent a very little amount of time on it. I know Zinnia's only spent a little bit of amount of time on it, because we don't have council direction to be pursuing this at this point. That's a council policy direction. If you want to go that route, then obviously we'll start moving down that road and get you better answers with the UGB and any other information that the council needs.
Okay. Yeah, I bring this up because, you know, when we talk about agricultural land, most people are going to think about growing produce or feed. But if you look, I don't know, again, it's probably, the language is probably kind of vague, so like you say, it's open to interpretation. But if you look at the county land uses that are for agritourism is considered agricultural. So if you have a land that is, you know, mostly preserved, that could be farm or could house certain animals, you could have a hostel there, or you can have some sort of, more of a hospitality enterprise there. So we need to, we would need to look at exactly what that means and if it fits within the guidelines of the urban growth boundary language or not. I personally am of the thought that if you don't have control over the land that's around you, then somebody else is going to call the shots. So it is in the best interest in Solvang to be able to have a voice when it comes to water and wastewater and the impact that the different industries that we have in town have. And I think it's worth also exploring, seeing as how it gets harder and harder to make a living as a farmer, that many of these agricultural projects have to choose to do hybrid projects that involve hospitality and people communing with nature. And if you haven't been glamping, it's all about having an experience that is as rustic as possible. The construction is minimal, the amenities are kind of built within the land, and I think it's a great opportunity to have a different experience from a traditional hotel, and explore the possibility of preserving rather than developing the land that we have around. But I would like to see exactly what it is that we are bound to do based on the urban growth boundary resolution.
Any last comments? Yep.
It takes a motion, doesn't it?
I can add one thing, though. I mean, since, as Mr. Jackson said, since the beginning of the Alisol, I think that Solvang needs the Alisol Ranch more than the Alisol Ranch needs Solvang, because you guys have been a gold mine for this city, and yourselves, your property, and about 2 or 3 other properties account for a very large percentage of our TOT, which is one of the reasons why we can keep some of our costs down in this city, because of the revenue that you generate. Anything that I can do to help the city coffers without stepping on people's toes, legally or physically, I'm all for. It's your property, you already own it, it's surrounded by the rest of your property. I've seen that hillside, I know what it looks like, and I know what the conceptual looks like. So aside from any sort of issues we have with UBG, because I voted for UBG because I didn't want farmland being turned into apartments as you come into Solvang. I didn't want to see a Trump Tower at the bottom of the hill like that meme was floating around. That was my reason for supporting that, keeping Solvang rustic and the way it is. But as I reiterate that this town needs the Alisol more than the Alisol needs us, and I would support something like this conceptually.
Yep. Do we need a motion to go forward? Just provide policy direction? What are we looking for right now?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we direct the staff to continue the conversation and see where this leads us, what the requirements are, what it's gonna take for us and for the Alisol to make this work.
Yeah, and how much is it gonna cost?
And how much it's gonna cost, yeah.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Yurick.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item number 6.
Skid Mesa Code Enforcement. Receive public comment from Skid Mesa neighborhood, including a written statement submitted to the city included in this agenda.
Thank you. So just to introduce this item and why we are here today and some of the background on it, is that on October 11th, the City Council received public comment on items not on the agenda, requesting for this item to be placed on the agenda. Per council consensus, the item has been placed on tonight's agenda to receive further public comment. The staff report, page 45, includes a summary of the history and prior applicable planning commission and city council agenda items leading to current enforcement actions of the municipal code. Those, just as a way of reminder, were various issues that had to deal with sheds, storage of recreational vehicles, pools being installed, fences being moved, changes to the landscaping, some of which had to do with the municipal code violations and others were just violations of the CCNRs. We've had this item come to council twice to receive direction, and the direction was to enforce a municipal code. So that is what staff has been engaged in, is specifically addressing the municipal code violations. Now, the materials presented in attachment E on page 408 have been submitted by a resident of Skid Mason on behalf of some number of residents. And that is Chris Horn, is the spokesperson who is available here to make this additional public comment.
Great, thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Chris, if you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Chris Horn. I'm coming up on 1 year as a resident of Solvang, so I greatly appreciate the community as established here. I do have slides I'd like to present over Zoom, so I have Zoom up. Senior, I'm going to share my screen. And let me go into Zoom. Great. Okay. So to start with, I got to apologize because these are a little bit wordy. Consider these slides to be more my flow to hit the points while keeping the train on the rails. There are only a couple slides with tables where I'll refer you to the slides, but otherwise I'm basically just going to talk to this. What brings me here today is that we've encountered what we see as opportunities to improve the municipal city code with respect to handling small sheds within setbacks. We've also encountered what we perceive to be kind of indiscriminate code enforcement from a process perspective that we think could be improved. Thank you very much for your time in hearing us out today. So, a brief history. We had a neighbor install a very large shed, nearly 14 feet high. It was directly on the property line. That looms, like nearly 8 feet above the fence line. Clearly, that was a problem. That's what the code, is meant to address. In that person's defense letter to the city, they listed 20 other homes close by in the neighborhood that also had sheds near a fence. What brings us here specifically is that the city's interpreted handling of that is that they interpreted that list of homes as sheds, as complaints in need of an enforcement action. As Solvang residents, we're absolutely fine to adhere to municipal code that the city is willing to uniformly enforce across the city. But in this case, we think there are other more constructive options, both for the city and all Solvang residents, to keep problems like this from recurring in the future and wasting everyone's time. A couple of points that the rest of the presentation is founded on that we likely can easily agree on. Residents should maintain their property in a manner consistent with public safety. Second, residents should have the general freedom to use their property for their benefit and enjoyment as long as their usage doesn't unreasonably harm community standards or create a nuisance to others. This is an important point. There has been significant previous discussion related to Skid Mesa CC&Rs and HONAs, Homeowners Association. From everything I've heard and understand, Skid Mesa CC&Rs do not prohibit sheds. They simply call for a review process by a non-existent HOA. Per the June meeting, City Council certainly expressed that you have the right but not the obligation to enforce CC&Rs. Not that there's necessarily anything to enforce here, but you've determined that you generally do not want to use city funds to actively enforce Skid Mesa CC&Rs. So from my perspective, my focus has nothing to do with Skid Mesa. It has to do with all of Solvang, Solvang municipal code, and Solvang enforcement process. Which really obviates about 350 pages of content that's in the agenda packet. So, very briefly, definitions are loose in code definitions. Sheds would generally fall under, accessory building or structure, and accessory buildings are generally brick and mortar or sheetrock type construction. A simple Rubbermaid, resin shed is a structure. Anything constructed or erected, the use of which requires location on the ground. The point is, they're very general definitions, on purpose. My next point here with respect to the setbacks, they're very generous. And that's great for buildings to, ensure aesthetics of the town. The side setbacks are 10% the width of the lot, with a minimum of 5 feet and a maximum of 20. Distance between buildings are 10-foot minimum between, the home and any other detached building or structure. So what these setbacks mean would be that without some exclusion for, small sheds, within reason, I have a half-acre lot. I have a 20-foot side yard, but I have a 7x7 Rubbermaid shed that doesn't fall within the allowance. And so that's basically the type of thing that we're advocating for, is handling that allows homeowners to more appropriately situate, sheds on their property. So that was the quick background. With respect to the complaint-based municipal code enforcement system, my understanding is that many cities pursue a two-pronged strategy to maintain character, public safety, nuisance control, etc., using municipal code and a selective enforcement process. The first prong is to create a restrictively written municipal code that disallows anything you might want to discourage, control, moderate, prevent, etc. The second prong is to then rely on a complaint-based enforcement system such that you have the authority to enforce that restrictively written code, as needed. The city chose to interpret this list of homes as complaints in need of enforcement. The city's perspective is that once the city becomes aware of possible violations of municipal code, the city must take enforcement action as their awareness creates liability. Now, our challenge with that as residents is we're being held to this first prong, the restrictively written municipal code, even though the enforcement discretion that is assumed in the second prong, created by an actual, injured or at-risk complaining neighbor, is not present in this case. The second prong is kind of like a safety valve that isn't being applied here. There is no one complaining about these sheds. These sheds have been there for years. They're not a problem. They're usual and customary in the neighborhoods. Certainly, when somebody does complain about a shed, the code enforcement process should review that complaint. But our foundational position is that there were never complaints here. They were simply interpreted by the city as needing enforcement action. The defending neighbor actually stated in their letter they did not want to file a complaint against their neighbors. Their intent was to justify keeping their very large shed, not to make the rest of their neighbors lose their sheds. So, the city is acting, out of a motivation of liability precaution, which is totally understandable. If something bad were to happen following being made aware of the homes with sheds within building setbacks, then the city could potentially be held liable in a lawsuit. Our challenge is that absent a risk to public safety, the city should not treat this list of 20 homes with sheds any differently than it treats all the other homes with sheds in Solvang. These enforcement actions to us are random and arbitrary. Which homes were put on the list. There are many other homes, directly on those streets with sheds that were not on the list. We basically fallen into this trap where anything that's constructed or erected, the use of which requires location on the ground, is now under review for these setbacks. But it's only for our homes. That's why it's selective. At this point, we've got one very valid complaint that automatically got turned into 20 enforcement actions using the city's current process. That's what our suggested proposals are. How could we basically short circuit this loop that got us from 1 to 20? A possible alternate handling could be that absent a legitimately complaining neighbor, the city could have chosen to perform a public safety review of these properties and only opened an enforcement case against those deemed to be a possible risk to public safety and therefore a possible liability to the city. A forward concern is that we have families that are rightly upset about this. And we would not basically want to see this process play out again, right? These 20 families were randomly looped in, and out of a sense of breaking the broken system, the protest would be that list gets bigger, and now you've got 200. Repeating the status quo pattern that got us to this point clearly benefits no one. By the way, how many of you, we briefly stand up, are here related to this concern? Great, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
So we certainly appreciate City Council's ongoing responsibility to mitigate, city liability. However, we think the current process inadequately accounts for the presence of a complaint or a nuisance before an enforcement action is created. So a possible solution to prevent this problem from occurring in the future could be to require that complaints be submitted individually through the website, right? So somebody can't just go and write down 20 addresses and send in a letter or send in an anonymous list. That you need to fill out a complaint, right, through the complaint system, and that creates a registered complaint. That would short circuit this thing getting amplified up the way it has that got all of us here. So absent a public safety issue, selective code enforcement actions created by complaints should be backed by an infringed party, somebody that has standing or vested interest in the outcome. That's our proposal. We're neck deep in this now, so this doesn't help us. But we wanted to put this on the table because we'd like to see process improvement. So that concludes the first point. Thank you for your patience. Let me. So on to the second part of this, related to municipal code definition and setbacks for small sheds. The root problem is that our municipal code has wide setbacks, but makes no allowances for small utility sheds. That's basically what we're asking for going forward. Wide setbacks are generally meant for buildings, brick and mortar construction. Dave, you mentioned in the June meeting that state regulations don't treat small garden sheds as structures for building code purposes. That structures under 12 feet high, less than 120 square feet, don't require a building permit at the state level. They get special handling in effect. So when this letter of the law is applied, most Solvang homes with a third of an acre or half an acre, in my case, can't accommodate a small utility shed except in the middle of the backyard, basically, which is not the most useful, aesthetically pleasing place to site your shed, right? The most sensible place is typically adjacent to a fence in the side or rear yard. Just as a note, many of the sheds that are in question here were professionally installed, by vendors like Tough Shed, through contractors from Home Depot. They all, believed they were conforming to permitting and municipal code requirements, not interpreting what they were installing as a structure for purposes of setbacks. So, recognizing the problem inherent with unclear municipal code requirements, many towns and cities have created specific allowances. This is just some examples. Sonoma, Calistoga, Walnut Creek, Palm Springs, we're in good company. Sonoma supports, for example, 6-foot setback from the main house. If this, structure is over 8 feet high, then a 5-foot setback from the property line. If it's under 8 foot high, it can be right next to the property line. So, I can go through the rest, but it's really not necessary. The point is that these example allowances aren't right or wrong per se. It's simply that we should provide allowances for reasonable utility sheds in sensible locations when they're not a nuisance to their neighbors or a risk to public safety. So, City Council owns the municipal code. You can amend or clarify the municipal code, the definitions within it, and or your stated interpretation of them to improve the handling of utility sheds. So our ask to City Council is to pause this enforcement action while determining if changes are warranted to either the code itself or your interpretation of the code with respect to placement of storage sheds. Here's a specific proposal based on our evaluation of other code examples, as well as resident perspectives on what we think is reasonable for Solvang. So on the top line, and this is one of those few tables in here that's useful to actually reference, if the shed size is either under 120 square feet or 12 feet high, or we'd be fine to go smaller than that, 100 square feet and 10 feet high, then instead of following the default building setbacks, we would have reduced setbacks of ensuring 5 feet from the main structure and 3 feet from the side or rear property line. And then taking down, to small sheds under 60 square feet and under 8 foot 6 inches high, there would be a no side or rear setback requirement. Now keep in mind, all sheds or structures in this case must maintain a clear path of access, at least 5 feet wide, from the front of the property to the rear of the yard. And they should maintain 30 inches between storage sheds as a recommendation. The driver for that 5 feet of access front to back is fire safety. So that came up before, but it's always been vague or amorphous, right? There's public safety, there's fire safety. We've had folks get home safety inspections by the fire department. We have consulted multiple firefighters in our community. Per everything that we've been able to discern as to what fire safety means in context of placement of a shed, it pretty much has to do with safe mobility for firefighters. And 3 to 5 feet of access is generally considered sufficient. Most fence gates are 3 foot 6 inches wide. So that was why we recommended that provision to address that concern related to fire safety. That concludes part 2. Thank you for hanging with me. So in conclusion, the current municipal code simply disallows any structures, including storage sheds, within the existing building setbacks. Without any counterbalancing public benefit or public safety benefit, the lack of any setback accommodation for small storage sheds in the current Solvang municipal code is unduly restricting our rights to use and enjoy our property. We shouldn't have to be wasting our time and your time to get something that all of the other residents of Solvang who were not listed in the defense letter already enjoy. So with this status quo municipal code and the enforcement policy, my take is basically the proverbial baby is being thrown out with the bathwater. We are being disallowed from having something good, a reasonable shed to house garden tools, out of a well-intended motivation to avoid something bad, such as a giant shed looming over a fence line or blocking access for firefighters. With some minor adjustments to the code or your interpretation of it, we're confident we can allow Solvang residents to have small garden sheds in sensible locations while avoiding aesthetic and public safety issues. In this case, the current municipal code and processes that you've inherited isn't serving us well as Solvang residents, and we have the opportunity to improve. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris, appreciate that. And in all transparency, I had met with Chris and a few other residents of Skip Mesa probably a couple of months ago now, I'm guessing, and had suggested that they put this on so that we can all have some discussion about it, or just so that you can all understand what they're going through and feeling and seeing if we need to make some changes. I know in my role prior, there were some city ordinances that I'm not a fan of trying to enforce as a law enforcement officer, and sometimes to me less is more. And if we can improve or get something changed for the better of all, I think that would be beneficial for us. But anyway, is there any comments of the council or questions?
Chris gave a shout out to Tough Shed and Home Depot, but I'd like the residents of Skip Mesa to know there's a lumberyard across the street from where y'all live. If you ever drive by, just stop in sometime and
He's a vote
employees and spend some money. Thanks.
And he is a voting member.
And I spend money there.
Yeah, we did too.
Thank you.
I thought that was a very good presentation, Mr. Horner. I appreciated having it. But I'd like some comments from our attorney regarding the presentation he made, or portions or all those recommendations that he made, something that we can consider.
Well, ultimately, the code is what you say it is. You'll get recommendations from the Planning Commission as to what's appropriate, but I do want to point out to the council that every homeowner in Skip Mesa bought into the development with a set of CC&Rs that prohibit the creation of improvements without a specific process. The municipal code was in place at the time all those properties were constructed, so each one of those sheds was constructed maybe professionally, but in violation of both the CCNRs and the municipal code. So in a sense, this is an opportunity for the homeowners to come in and say, the speed limit is too slow. We would like you to raise it because we all like driving 65 in a 55 zone. That is a matter of policy for council to make that decision. But the prior direction that the council gave us was to enforce the code as it's written. And the code as it's written prohibits these in the side yard setbacks. There are reasonable locations for the sheds to be located on the property. They may not be the most aesthetically pleasing, but side yard setbacks are there not only for public safety, but for aesthetic purposes as well. So ultimately, the council can give us direction as to what you would like the code to look like, whether or not you would like to see these sheds, and whether or not you would like to have opportunities to modify the code. But we're just working on the direction that the council gave us previously on this.
Thank you. If you could go clarify the state requirements now, I know for
well,
they had this.
Yeah, the state requirement is just the building code. Residential building code does not require a building permit for a shed of under 120 square feet. That is a completely separate set of regulations than the city's zoning requirements. And it may well not require a building permit, but it certainly does require some consideration of the zoning code. And the zoning code does prohibit them in the particular locations where they've been tagged. I really like not to get into a discussion of how the city's enforcement process works, because that is even more difficult to deal with. As a prosecutor, I have to exercise prosecutorial discretion, and I can't really take direction on who I should enforce against and who I should not. When we do get a complaint, we take a look at it. We have a code enforcement officer who has law enforcement experience. He puts together a packet, and then I have to make a determination of whether or not there's going to be a code enforcement complaint issued on that. So I work with Eddie on that kind of thing. The fact that there may or may not be a complaint, limiting it to only those situations where there's a complaint, we may not need a code enforcement officer in that situation then, because code enforcement officer is charged with going out and seeing if there are violations of the code, whether or not there's a complaint. If you walk around downtown, there are issues where there has been no complaint by any member of the public, but it's a clear violation of the municipal code. And that's kind of a slippery slope if that's not going to be enforced. So I think if the council is inclined to make any changes, that it do so just with respect to the side yard setbacks, perhaps utility sheds, but leave the enforcement program along the way it is.
One of the things that I get confused about this is, I understand at the time that the Skip Mesa was being built, the CCRs were there and everybody signed them as they bought their residences. Who enforced the CCRs at that time?
Well, just to be clear, the way the CCNRs work, they are recorded against the actual physical land by the developer. The developer puts those on. The people who buy into the development don't necessarily sign the CCNRs, but they're bound by them because they run with the land, they run with the piece of property. And so the enforcement of the CCNRs, while the city has the ability to, it doesn't have the obligation. Where CCNRs are typically enforced are either through a homeowners association or through mutual enforcement. So you get a neighbor who says, hey, I don't like what you're doing with your home. I'm going to file a lawsuit against you, or I'm going to make a complaint because you are violating the CCNRs. They can be self-enforcing in that regard. So there can be private enforcement.
But literally, if they put a shed in their backyard that violates this limit from the property line, there was nobody there to say yes or no. You couldn't go to them for approval before you put it out.
Right.
There
You
is
just built it.
There is a provision in the CCNRs as to the process, and it depended in the time when they were put in place, because as you remember, Skip Mesa was developed in several phases.
Right.
The declarant, the developer who put it together, still owned parcels as these were being built. And so there's a process in the CCNRs for architectural and other approvals for what they refer to as improvements, which are structures like sheds. Sheds are actually explicitly included within the definition of improvements within the CCNRs. So there's that process. But after the declarant is no longer in possession of any of the properties, it's a slightly different procedure. And then you have the design manual. And the city has a role to play in that, but certainly to say there was no processes in place at all and there was no regulations at all would not be true, because the city has its municipal code, and even if the CCNRs permitted this kind of construction, it would still have to be in conformity with the city's code.
Well, but the city code, and the city code has a setback requirement even for those less than 120 square feet and less than 12 foot, right?
Correct. They're separate issues. The 120 square foot, in my view, is a red herring issue because it's not a building permit.
It's not, right?
But for example, if you wanted to park a Class A motorhome in the side yard setback, that would be prohibited as well.
Right.
And Class A motorhome doesn't require a building permit. So it's the same kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
So just
I
as a,
think Steve wanted, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, just as a comment, we're being impacted, purely by current municipal code, not having any provision for sheds. That's basically what we're asking for. So I would, think, to my thinking, the CCNRs don't play into it, because A, they don't specifically preclude sheds, they simply call for a non-existent process.
Okay.
So I think if we can just focus the conversation on should Solvang residents external to the Skip Mesa neighborhood be able to have small sheds within setbacks, that's the question we're putting before you. Are you open to an allowance for that? Versus the opposite is saying that you're willing to enforce that uniformly across the city, which would be very disruptive.
And I know personally, I know sheds that don't meet the criteria, and I'm not gonna complain about them. But,
I mean, that is one of the difficult things about code enforcement, because if you choose to say, we're not going to enforce the code, then don't have the code. If you have a code and there are reasons for doing it, and if it comes to your attention that there are violations of the code, it doesn't mean you turn a blind eye in those situations where people say, well, it's not that big a deal. Again, returning to my speeding analogy, we have 2 law enforcement officers here, and I can tell you, they've probably pulled over people and said, everyone else is speeding, why are you pulling me over? And the question is, were you speeding? Well, yes, I was. Okay, I'll write you the ticket. It's the same kind of situation. It's an allocation of resources. There may be other people in town who have the violations of the shed, and we may ultimately catch them. We may ultimately be engaged in enforcement. But the question right now is, we received a complaint regarding a shed. It was not in compliance with the city's municipal code. The complainant, the person owning that shed said, I'm aware of other ones, and pointed those out. And we looked and said, yep, those are violations as well. And so it became this kind of, this daisy chain, if you will, of enforcement issues. But when it comes to city's attention on that, and it's a violation of the code, we were given direction by the council to enforce the code as it's written. And that is what we have been attempting to do. If the council wants to change that direction, we can certainly do that as well. If the council wants to change the municipal code to allow sheds, then if you can give us some direction to do that, we can present something to the planning commission. They can present you a recommendation as to what changes might be appropriate, if any at all, and then we have that process going forward.
If we change the requirements in the code, is it retroactively release all of those people that are now not in violation of the new code?
Well, it's going to depend on the code, the way it's written, because I can't tell you individually whether or not the planning commission's gonna come up with a percentage of width, if it's gonna come up with an absolute distance. So we have to go out and look anew at each one of these situations, determine whether or not it's in compliance with the new code. Just as we would do in this situation, we would take a look and see if it's in compliance with the code. But in a situation where there's a 10-yard side yard setback and you have an 8-foot wide shed, I can tell you that's a problem. That is not in compliance with the code. If it's a 30-foot wide setback and you have an 8-foot wide shed, that could be, because I've got to look at the total lot width under the code to determine whether or not it's an appropriate one. So it's a complicated situation.
That's kind of what I want.
I have a question.
I think we've got.
Is the entire community or the majority of the residents of Skip Mesa basically at war with one homeowner?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. That first issue has been settled, that shed has been removed.
Okay.
We would all concur that that shed was, excessive.
Okay.
And by all means should be the community should be protected from sheds like that by the municipal code. What we're
It was the
asking.
reaction that is the reason everybody's here. Okay.
Yeah, the reason everyone's here is because they similarly believe that they should have reasonable use of their property. They're not asking for, a 50 caliber machine gun firing in the backyard, this is not, they're asking for a garden shed to put the lawnmower in.
I want the city to do what it takes to make this go away. This is not our gig. We're not hearing this in Village Collection, we're not hearing it in Network States, we're not hearing this in Creekside. It's just, it started out as like a complaint, and I've been looking at the emails, I've been doing this for 3 years, and it's turned into it's got a life of its own. And I would, at the most minimal effort and cost, I want us to assist this group to make this go away.
Dave, in your analogy of a law enforcement officer stopping and writing a ticket, we've always had the discretion to either write the ticket or not. And if we were to be charged for not enforcing the law on every person we stopped who was speeding, we'd have some real problems here. So I wonder if there's a way that we can instruct our code enforcement people to respond to legitimate complaints, but certainly not to be proactively going out and looking for issues.
Well, again, that gets into the philosophy of code enforcement. If the council perceives an issue with the Skip Mesa sheds, we can take direction on how to solve that. The larger question of whether or not code enforcement should be going out proactively, you are taking away a tool, for example. And I hate to go back to the law enforcement analogy, but two of you have that experience. If you told a police officer stop patrolling and just wait till people call 911, you would miss a lot of the situations that need to be addressed.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, and the same is true with code enforcement. If code enforcement doesn't take a proactive and waits for complaints to come in, you will see A-frame signs all throughout downtown on the sidewalks until somebody complains. You will see bunting flying from every business that wants to put it out there. And you will have a situation where what makes Solvang unique and what makes Solvang attractive to people coming from around the world will have been detracted from, because we have these codes and we have these rules in the TRC to attract people. The sheds are a completely different situation, and so again, if the council wants to address the sheds, we have ways to do that. We can take it back to the Planning Commission. They can give you a recommendation on how to solve this particular situation.
Or defund code enforcement.
Is that coming from you?
Other cities have bigger problems.
Chris, I've given you enough time, I think. What I would like to do is go to public comment unless there's any other comments up here.
Well, I think
I'm
it's,
sorry.
yes, and I'm sure there were perfectly fine reasons why the ordinance was written the way that it was written, and maybe it's a good idea to bring it up so that we can say, oh, these are the reasons why there are setbacks and these requirements and everything. I hate to be in the position of telling people what to do and not to do on their property that they spent nearly $1 million in and they maintain concurrently. I think it's worth looking at whether we can relax the requirements, reevaluate them, because storage is needed, and they can be installed in a way that does not endanger the public's safety. And it sounds like this is going to be this would be a process involving the Planning Commission, and this is going to be lengthy. It's not going to be done tonight. Yeah, I know we're running late. Try doing this every 2 weeks for 4 hours.
It's just common sense. It makes me crazy. It's just common sense. It's treat your neighbors right, and it's common sense.
All right.
So, back to that. We're looking at the ADU thing. It can be approved ministerially, and the requirements are much more relaxed than for sheds. And I would imagine there's more danger for fire if you have kitchens in an ADU unit versus just storing your gardening equipment in it. So I think it's worth looking at it. There is no need to have restrictions if they're more trouble than they're worth. So that's my
We need to
stand.
send it to the planning commission then.
Yes.
Well,
Okay, well, that's
before we
fine.
do, I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to say something, and I'd like to take it out to the public comment at this time. I don't have any speaker slips, but you've raised your hand a few times, so I'll start with you. Go right ahead. Come on up and please just state your name and for the record, and then your comments. You have 3 minutes.
Irina Malkmos, I'm a resident of the Skat Mesa, and I want to tell you one important thing. None of our house have attic or basement. So we basically have just one entry. How do you call this? Where we put our stuff, jars and pantry.
Pantry.
Yeah. So we have just one small pantry, and that's all. So I'm a single mom with 3 children, and when season is changing, all our swimming stuff, I just bring it from room to room, and I have just one shed behind the house that nobody see because my tree already grew, and now it's here on the list, and I'm in shock of tree. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Come on up. Again, just state your name for the record.
Hi, Rovi Butcher. I just want to say that none of the neighbors adjacent to us who have sheds are complaining. So there really is no complaint right next to where we live. The complaint is from the original 14-foot barn. So really the complaint doesn't exist, right? So it's trying to solve a problem that has no really complaint issue. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Go ahead, sir.
Hello, my name is Jay Carsman. My wife and I live at 621 Valley Oak Road in Skid Mesa. We have a 20-foot side yard on the side of our house. It has standard wooden fence, wooden gate in that. We had a tough shed installed. I was not aware of needing planning commission or zoning restrictions. But when we had this shed designed, it measures 6 feet wide and 8 feet long, and it's 7.5 feet high. And we made sure that it was made exactly to match our house. White with the dark wood trim so that it looked really pretty and really fit in. There's tons of room on both sides, and we just keep garden tools in it, just all. And if you were able to come to some resolution, we would be so grateful to you. And also, Eddie is my friend, and he's not here to defend himself, so I'll defend him. He's a really great guy trying to do the best job he can, and I appreciate it.
You don't need to defend Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other in the audience that would like to say anything? Add anything? Is there anyone out in Zoom that would like to say anything? No comment out in Zoom, so just bring it back for final comments and council direction. I think what I'm hearing is just that we would ask staff to, or planning commission to maybe come up with some options for measurements for side setbacks and rear setbacks, specifically for sheds, not an ADU or any of that type of stuff, but specifically just for sheds.
I think the examples that Chris gave, what's based on size, how many feet, I thought was a really good starting point to present to the planning commission. I think I'd like to see that.
If I could add, the one, Chris had that one bullet point on the alternate handling, a better point. And we've saved that, but that's a very good point. That one page that had the the bullet points of alternate handling, and I agree with what he was saying.
Page 412 and 13, 413.
Yeah, and I would ask that we suggest to our enforcement officer that absent a specific request or complaint, that he kind of stand by until this gets back to the planning commission and we look at what the rules are. It's not different from telling officers where they should or shouldn't go and enforce versus not enforce.
Just to be clear, with respect to sheds, you're not giving instruction with respect to the rest of the city regarding other types of code enforcement issues, are you?
No, I think right now it's just
Just about
specifically.
sheds.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Because I'm building one.
Just sheds. And obviously this wouldn't apply for, this is citywide.
Can we just call them ADUs and we're good to go?
No, we do not want to call it ADUs. It would help arena numbers, but not right now.
Okay, so just to be
Sheds
clear,
taken care of first.
I hear direction from the council. I don't think we need a motion because it seems it's fairly unanimous that you're directing staff to take a matter to the planning commission for a recommendation regarding revisions to city's municipal code provisions for residential zones with respect to sheds in the side and rear yard setbacks, essentially.
Yes.
And I see nodding heads across the dais. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Good job, Chris.
Good job, Chris.
Thank you all for being here and being a part of it.
Thank you.
All right. Do we want to take a break? We have one item left. We're good to go? We'll go for, give us 2 minutes. We'll be back in 4 minutes. We'll take a adjourning right now at 8:33.
My grandson graduated.
Oh, yeah?
I just got to swim into the sheriff's office.
I was just gonna say, of course he's a policeman.
All right. Hey, are we ready? We're back. Call the meeting back to order at 8:32. And Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 7?
Pay for performance program for management employees. Receive and approve staff recommendations to establish a pay for performance program for management employees, department heads and managers.
Thank you. I'll present the report. So just by the way of background, with the current fiscal year 2021-22, the City Council approved a new budget which included reorganization, both funding some of the positions that were with the city before and also amending and creating some new positions or modified positions. Following the budget adoption and negotiation with the union Teamsters representing non-management employees, an agreement was reached for a 1-year MOU, which included 2.25% COLA and housing allowance increase from $400 to $500 per month. So negotiation with the representative MOU or employees is something that is a duty between the city and the union, which is how that recommendation was reached and put into place and approved by the City Council. On September 27th, the Council approved pay range schedules for management non-represented employees reflecting the new organization. Since most of the management employees are either, those positions are either vacant or they're very new to the city, the recommendation at that point was not to apply a COLA increase, but instead over the next year to perform a compensation study, which would be evaluating the pay scales for all employees in the city. So without committing the city to an increase in COLA for management and department head employees who are, applying for the positions based on the existing advertised salaries, we have some flexibility to first have a compensation study and going forward potentially adjust accordingly the salaries going forward in order to stay competitive and be able to attract the talent to the city. So at that point, there was a recommendation to also go ahead and raise the housing allowance from $400 to $500 per month for the management employees. So what I am proposing here today is a pay for performance program, which would only be for management and department head employees who are at-will employees. They're not represented by the city, so it's basically employment without obligation on either side for any particular duration. The why between for performance, pay for performance like this compared to just having employees go through step increases over the years is linking the strategic planning with the performance evaluations. So for example, when you have an employee reach or start at the maximum of their range, there is no longer room for them to receive an incentive and pay for performance. So performance evaluations provided in alignment with organizational annual budget goal setting would also be the desired outcome. So the system would be essentially switched to where once a budget is developed, once goals are set for that particular year, there is an opportunity for city manager and department head management employees to agree as to the goals that they would be achieving over the next year. There is then a set form and specific measurable outcomes that are achievable and agreed upon ahead of time that they would be working on throughout the year. At the end of the year, there would be a performance evaluation and an incentive not to exceed 3% for additional pay based on their performance. So this is only a one-time bonus that does not structurally change ongoing pay structure, so there is no long-term commitment. And this is proposed for the current year as we onboard many of these positions and basically rebuilding the entire management team for the city due to the vacancies and the prior layoffs, as well as just some additional natural turnover to where we've just have onboarded city clerk. We have our assistant to the city manager, management analyst, who was brought in over the last year. We are hiring for the planning manager, also hiring for public works director, utilities director, and we also have just onboarded a human resources manager. So this would be the positions that would be subject to this pay for performance as proposed.
I'm sorry, would you read that again? How many people are you talking about?
So 6 people: public works director, utilities director, city clerk, planning manager, assistant to the city manager, and human resources manager.
This, I thought, I heard you say that you were going to do an assessment to find out what the budget what a salary range should be for that kind of position? And you're hiring people in at those levels?
So no, right now we are hiring people at the pay range levels that are similar to the pay range levels that or are within the pay range levels that have existed here with the city for a while. Some of the positions were budgeted at certain levels when the budget was proposed, as far as where, you know, that skill level would need to fall in. Obviously, more skilled positions get paid more with higher qualifications. And then on September 27th, you as council approved the range schedules for the current fiscal year for these management employees. So we're hiring within those existing pay scales. But the recommendation was also, at the time of that approval, to perform a compensation study going forward over about the next year or so to compare how we as City of Solvang are comparable and competitive with other jurisdictions within, you know, our cost of living, and continue to be able to be competitive to attract the adequate talent in these management positions and overall to the city.
But you haven't done the study yet?
No, have not.
Then if you haven't done the study yet, how do you know what you should be giving these people as a bonus, if you will, or what are you calling it, incentive?
Performance bonus here is proposed as a one-time deal, not to exceed 3%, so it's somewhat comparable to the 2.25% COLA that the union employees received. On average, it would probably be, you know, closer to that. And it's already included in the forecasts of the current budget, because it wasn't known at the time you adopted the budget whether there would be a COLA or not applied to these positions. So there's no budgetary impact by doing this. It gives some incentive for this new incoming management department head team to set the goals. We'd have a conversation based on the goals that need to be achieved for the rest of this fiscal year, and provide them some incentive and potential additional pay that they could receive regardless of where they are on the pay scale currently.
I don't think I understand that.
So right now, the management positions, if I'm not mistaken, they still have some steps to them.
Those that start at a level that's less than the highest level, yes, after a year of performance, they could qualify for a step increase.
And that's 5% currently.
That's approximately 5% currently.
So is that gonna play in addition to this performance bonus? An additional?
All employees have our range schedule for the city is set into 5 steps.
Right.
Each step is about 5% increase from one to the next. All employees are subject to the step system that exists here at the city. So if someone started at step 1 when they were hired, based on qualification and the offer that they were made, after a year, they qualify for a step increase. On top of that, annually, there is this negotiation with the union in terms of COLA increases and other benefits, which is what was given to the union employees. My recommendation was not to arbitrarily apply that same COLA to the management employees at the time when you considered range schedules, but to instead make an informed decision next year based on compensation study as to where those salary ranges should be falling. In the meantime, because we have a brand new management team onboarding right now, this would be just a tool to have the goal setting with each one of them as they come into the city, and then evaluate them by those terms that we come to an agreement with, which are based on the overall organizational strategy and goals, which then the management team would be evaluated at the end of the fiscal year in order to determine whether they qualify for this bonus, which is already included in existing budget.
Who would do that evaluation and recommendation?
City manager.
Sorry, who? You?
Myself.
Okay. And you set the goals?
Correct, in accordance with the goals that you have already set for the organization and myself.
So I still want to just make sure I have this right. If we, let's say we just hired someone tomorrow, Public Works Director, in a year, they're gonna get a step increase anyway. And this is it gonna be in addition to possibly a performance bonus if we do this, and a cost of living increase.
So you would next year consider where there needs to be any additional, there's kind of 3 steps. There's the compensation study, which is a look at how do we compare with other jurisdictions and what should we be paying for those skills in those positions. So that's the structural analysis. Then there is the COLA, which COLA will depend, especially right now with the crazy CPI and inflation, as to where are we a year from now, and what should be the appropriate COLA, and what can the city afford as far as COLA. And then the last step would be this pay for performance, which is a one-time payment just to incentivize performance of those goals for that set period of time. Right now, we did not add any COLA increase to the range schedules for the management employees for this current year.
So
This current year though.
This current year.
Then we're only talking
We're
just
only
this
talking
budget
this
year right now.
This budget year.
But you, as a city manager, assuming you had 2 employees that you're looking at, you can make a decision that one of them would get an increase and one of them would not?
So the way that this would look is that we would have a performance evaluation form that gets filled out when the employee is onboarded, and we have a conversation about what are the goals for, say, planning, for example. Those goals would be aligned in terms of what are the achievable outcomes that we are looking to achieve in planning throughout this fiscal year. It's a conversation between the city manager and the planning manager of what is achievable and what is reasonable. That performance plan is then the road that we work off for the rest of the year. And if we achieve all those goals, and the employee obviously has a way of discussion, making sure it's reasonable expectations, then at the end of the year there is a scoring that's built into the form that gets applied and basically creates a result as to what level of increase would be applied to.
So is any of this decision subjective based on how you feel about it?
I would say it's no different than any other performance evaluation. I would still have to do performance evaluations with staff, and it's the same process as any performance evaluation.
I understand that, but I had a pretty large organization, and I never had the authority, nor did I want the authority to increase anybody's pay unless it was through a process of they were being promoted to a specific position. And I'm not sure I would have wanted that power.
And that is definitely differences in philosophy. There is the government philosophy that, you know, sets, maybe it was what you were used to, that sets the ranges and just sticks to the ranges and does not apply that type of discretion. I can tell you that when I worked for the County of Santa Barbara, they went through this process of taking all management and executive employees to pay for performance program, which is very simple, similar to what I'm suggesting here with a bonus structure. There are other governments that have pay for performance tied to their pay scale, for example. So instead of jumping one step, you could jump 2 steps if you were a top performer type of structure built into that. It's a difference of preference. I just proposed this because out of the desire to provide the new incoming management team some incentive to have additional pay for performance.
But that incentive is also that step, which
If
they
so,
may or may not get based on your evaluation of them anyway.
Yeah.
that is true. In all transparency, the position offers can be offered at different steps. So if somebody was, for example, at the highest step, there would be no further incentive for increase in pay.
True, but that's 5 years down the road possibly, or at least 1 year down the road.
Not necessarily.
We're-
So
we're-
there is no restrictions on what step the employees come into, depending on the offer and their skills.
Okay. Is there any other comments at this time? I don't have any more. We'll take it out for discussion.
There's no members of the public.
There is no one on Zoom or in the audience at this time. So we're bringing it back to council for final direction. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion to go with the recommendation or
No.
not to approve the action at this time?
I just think that if you can't get good people, then that's an issue that needs to be dealt with separately. The only way I could is that it would be very complicated to say, if you save the city and the taxpayers this much money, then there'd be something going. But to start throwing in the bonuses when, look, we're advertising it at a rate. If you want it, take it. If you don't, don't. And if we're not getting qualified people because of an extra $3,000 or $4,000, then it's something we need to address. Of course, I always like to keep any remunerations as much as we can off of what the state says people make, but I'm just I'm not comfortable with it.
There's a terrible thought that you know, I'm kind of a believer in that all boats rise with the tide theory. There would be at least a perception of favoritism because whoever you give the extra money to, the people that you don't, and that's the way they're going to look at it, and that creates dissension, and I think makes it very difficult to manage. So I understand where you're coming from, but I can't support it.
Another way to reward I'm good with, but I just think this is, I don't know, it's just different.
So I move that we don't accept this proposal.
Just elect not to do this action at this time.
So is there a second?
Do you have a second on that?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
I think it's a
It's a
yes.
yes, no, it's a no,
I
yes.
think it's a yes for,
I'm agreeing with Mr.
No
Councilmember Infante, what he said.
It's a yes, we don't want it. Yes, and it's for me too, yes, I don't want it.
Councilmember Infante is
Yes.
a yes, no. Mayor Pro Tem Morona.
No.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, no.
Mayor Urich.
yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Morona, is that a yes, no, or is that a no-no?
No, that's a no, I would support this.
You would support it?
Yes.
Okay, so passes 4-1.
Passes 4-1 is a not.
Does not pass
Yeah,
4-1.
thank you.
All right. Moving on to item number 8, and I don't think we have any final comments at this time. With that, our meeting is adjourned at 8:58. Thank you all.